And when did you start getting interested in hockey?
Well, while I was at school, the Old Boys Association had hockey teams, and they used to provide old hockey sticks to anybody from school who wanted to play. So one of my friends was already playing, so he talked me into going down and playing. So I got an old stick from school and went down and joined the Old Boys team.
So and
Melbourne High, MHSOB right. It was. And they played down at Elserwick Park because there were no grounds at Melbourne High itself and no facilities at all. And so I went down there and played with the under-16 team, having never seen a game and never played a game, obviously, but quickly learnt it. And we went up through and played under-18, and we won the 18 Melbourne competition. So then I had to move on to playing as a senior and went through various grades up to the top grade and played in the top grade mainly in my second top, when it was playing in the second top competition, which was A Reserve. A1 was the top competition, and it was from those players that state players and Olympic players were selected. And we, in A Reserve, wanted to get back into A1, so we had a team play together all year, and that's when I played with them, and we won that competition in A Reserve, and so went back up into A1 again. Yeah.
Did you ever play hockey and basketball at the same time?
Yes. Unfortunately, I couldn't get to training at the hockey because it was down at Elserwick Park at night, and I had no way of getting there other than trams and trains and everything else. But at one stage I was out nearly every. Well, Monday night I trained basketball. Wednesday played, Friday trained or played at the YMCA, and Saturday played hockey. The same week.
A week full of sport.
A week for it. And it's just the reason I wasn't playing on Tuesday and Thursdays because I was teaching night school then at migrant teaching.
Teaching what?
Migrant English.
Ah.
Yeah. A couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, a bit of everything.
Where were you, what school were you doing that through?
It was actually through one of the staff at Brighton, he was one of the staff there who actually ran this night class out at Hawkesburn, somewhere out that way, or Melbourne, I forget which it was now, and he asked me if I'd like to take a class, so which I did, because it was being paid for. And so I did that for about 2 years while I was at Brighton. Yes.
And you're 85, 86?
86.
86, so you were born in the 30s, that means?
34.
34. So you lived through the Second World War?
Yes,
was the 40s,
definitely, yep.
42 to 45,
that's right.
I think.
Oh, yeah.
Well, do you have any memories? How did that affect life in Australia as a wartime? Because Australia's heavily involved, of course.
More the end of the war and after, because of the rationing, because things were very short in supply.
What sort of stuff?
Food, everything, clothing, everything was very short. It had to come by, so you had to have a little booklet of coupons, and you had to take your little book along, and you'd buy and you'd pay a certain number of coupons as well as the money to be able to. So let's say you wanted a coat or something, it might be 4 or 5 clothing coupons, which you'd have to pay, because that's what rationing was. Yeah, so that's probably what I remember more about it than anything else, because...
You would have been 10, 11, 12,
yeah.
So high school, early high school.
Yeah, that's right. The other things I remember about it were the trenches, air raid shelters, in the school ground and in the church grounds. There were trenches actually dug in the back of the church ground, in the grass area there. At school,
just open trenches?
Yeah, open trenches, just the dirt piled up on the sides. At Albert Park, they had great big, like concrete
Bunkers.
Pipes, huge things, which they dug into the ground and then you sort of walked down into it.
So it would have been like an air raid shelter.
Well, that's what they were, air raid shelters. We used to have to practice.
Did you ever go in there?
Oh, yeah, we had to practice going.
An actual...
No, because Melbourne was never bombed.
Not an air raid.
No air raids.
There was never a threat or a suspicion of...
Well, there was always the concern that there might be, and that's why these things were built.
Sure.
And also at night you had to cover your windows.
Blackout.
Yeah, blackout.
Cover them with what?
A blind. You had to put a blind or a curtain up, anything that kept the light out or light in, virtually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
the city showing up.
Yeah.
All the lights.
Just in case the bombers came over, but of course they never did. I can't remember that because we probably never went out much at night.
Wow.
Yeah. So they're the sort of things, but we weren't, greatly affected by it. Mm.
And your older sisters, their husbands or anything, didn't go off to the war?
Well, yeah, they did.
The
they were in the Air Force, yeah. Gordon was a bombardier, so he was in England. I think they were both in England, actually. They joined the Air Force there because, the Australian didn't have much of an Air Force at all. So they joined the British one, and Gordon was a bombardier. I remember at one stage seeing some photos that he had of the land underneath.
Oh, from where he was looking down?
Where they would go to bomb. I think George was a pilot, but I don't know much about it. They didn't ever talk much about it at all.
Interesting. And you met Mum at Teachers College.
Yes.
We heard the story from Mum when I spoke to her.
So
you started going out. You were there helping them.
Well, I was there because there was a great shortage of phys ed teachers at that stage.
At the Teachers College?
There was no one at the Teachers College. He'd moved away. But the practice still was to have all the new students do phys ed for 2 or 3 weeks. And members of the phys ed staff, there were actual staffs of phys ed teachers who went to the baths and did all that sort of thing. There was the music ones who went around the schools teaching. There was the psychology branch, people who did, assisting of children with different needs. And the phys ed staff was made up, obviously, of phys ed teachers. And each year, at the start of the year, a couple of those were lent to the school, to the college for a few weeks, just to take all the new students for phys ed.
Teachers College students.
Yeah.
Teacher training teachers.
That's right. For the first 2 or 3 weeks of their time there.
Oh, I see. So
but in 54, there were none available because they were all busy training children for a big display for the Queen, who was coming out.
Right.
And because this other lass and myself were going on to university to do the diploma, the principal asked us to go back and take the work, even though we weren't proper trained phys eds at all. But he asked us to do it. I knew him fairly well at that stage through the basketball and football and everything else.
Yeah.
And so we said we would. And that was when June, who was the other one doing the work, asked me to go out dancing with her and her boyfriend. And anyway, it ended up that Mum was the one invited instead, so she went with me.
As the other partner?
As the other partner.
You went dancing to...
We were Ormond Hall, which is a special little dance hall in St Kilda. That was, you had to have a ticket to get in. And they were predominantly public school boys who had these tickets. I don't know how they got them in the first place. But after we'd been there that night, because the man that we were with was a St Kilda footballer and the runner of the dance place was a St Kilda supporter, we had free supper. And I asked him about the ticket, so he said, you come in to see my place in town and I'll give you one. So I did that the next week.
You went again?
So, many times.
With taking Mum every time?
Well, yeah. Most times, yeah. Later on, all the time, yes. That's right.
Ah, very good.
Yeah.
Did you go out with many other girls before you went out with Mum?
Yes. One. Yes. One I went with for about 18 months.
Oh, quite a long time. What was her name?
Dorothy Kiss, who lives just up in Stevenson Road.
Dorothy Kiss? Her name was Kiss?
Kiss.
That's a good name for a girlfriend.
That's her married name.
Oh.
Kay was her unmarried name. She married a European chap whose never was the name.
Right.
You have actually met her, but you probably don't remember.
No, I don't.
You don't. You would remember. I took you around to see her and her daughter one day. You and Chris.
When you went to that...
You'd been to a camp.
I don't remember that.
You'd been to a camp down at Gippsland, horse riding camp.
Yeah, right, yeah. I can't think of it.
No, I can't think of it either, but
Yes,
apparently this girl and Chris were fairly friendly throughout the camp.
Oh, right.
And when you came home with Chris, you told me this story. I said, I know her. We'll go round and see her. So I took you and Chris around to Stevenson Street, she still lives in the same house, to see her and the daughter, whose name I forget now.
I think it was Kathy.
That's right, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Kathy Kiss,
Yeah,
Kathy
that's right.
Kay.
Yeah, that's right. And I do remember the camp now. It was called Mill Valley Ranch.
That's it,
Yes,
that's
yeah,
it,
yeah,
that's it exactly, yeah, that's
Chris
right.
and I went.
Yeah.
We might have gone a couple of times, I think, to Mill Valley Ranch.
Well,
Anyway, definitely
you
once.
might have gone back along as a leader other times.
Maybe, possibly.
Probably the church group probably went, because I know a lot of people who went there.
Yeah, it was Christian camp.
Yeah,
Horse
that's right.
riding.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, very good. Oh, that's amazing. But
Well, Dorothy was one of the college girls, you see, when at
teach college.
the same year as me for 1 year, but then she went on to Melbourne to do ITC, because infant training. Yeah, he couldn't do that at Toorak at that stage. They did have it later. Anyway, so we started going out there then, and
Right.
yeah, we were out for a long time.
Quite a long time.
Yeah, but we had broken up before I met Mum anyway, so
Yeah.
yeah. So
And
there you go.
you and Mum got married when Mum finished teachers college.
Oh,
you
she
finished?
taught for 2 years
Oh, you
after
were
that.
all over the States.
Mum did, I didn't.
She was
I didn't
sent
move
all-
home.
all sorts
And
of
it suited
schools.
me to stay home because that was when I was playing the top level basketball and hockey, so it suited me to be still in Melbourne.
Absolutely.
And I only had the 3 years at Brighton. They asked for some of the phys ed staff to lend them somebody to introduce physical education as part of the curriculum. That's how I ended up at Brighton. So I was tech. I was lent to them, you see. I was a primary trained.
Yeah.
And so I was lent to them
Right.
and stayed there for 3 years, and then I was offered a position at Dandenong and Noble Park, which I took, and stayed there for many, many years. And
Dandenong High.
tech,
Or Dandenong
always in the techs, even though I was still technically, that's a good word,
primary teacher.
technically a primary, yeah. So I wasn't on the tech roll.
So
You
you're
know.
in phys ed, basically like high school phys ed teaching, pretty much. Even though it's
I'd
tech
say it was a secondary school. A tech school is a secondary school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. Yeah.
That's right.
So straight phys ed teacher.
Yeah,
So it's taking
yeah.
phys ed for the high school students,
Well, the tech schools,
tech
yeah.
school students.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
but that's the age group.
That's right. Oh, yeah, Form 3, 4.
5.
No, only at that stage, only 3 and 4. Or 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Um,
When did you decide to move on from phys ed teaching?
I decided that there was very little promotion, because to get promotion, the position at a school had to be advertised in what they called a gazette, and you could apply for it, and generally the most senior person would get that job. That was the system throughout. It was at all schools, primary schools, tech schools and primary, so 3 different divisions. And there were virtually nothing above a 3rd class in phys ed. So there's 3rd, then there's 2nd, then there's 1st, and then there's administration, which is vice principals and principals. So I was a long way down the list as a 3rd class.
So what did you do about it?
Well, actually, I decided that I should change over to teaching humanities, which is English and social studies in the tech schools, and went back to Monash University and started a degree there. But in the meantime, they decided that they would make some second-class positions in phys eds. And there were 3 positions made. One was in the country, another was over the other side of Melbourne, and one was at Frankston. And because I was by that stage pretty senior, I thought, well, if I'm going to get one, I better apply for one of these. So I applied for Frankston and got the job. So I then had to move to Frankston.
Another tech?
Yep, Frankston Tech. But on the first day there, they'd replaced me at Dandenong with a man who lived in Frankston. And so he rang up and said, would you be interested in a swap? Him go to Frankston, me go back to Dandenong. Well, it took us a few weeks to work it out, but we worked it, and so I went back to Dandenong.
But in the more senior role.
No, yeah, it took my promotion with me.
Yeah,
That's right. Okay. Yeah. However, having been back there for a few years, they had by then built a proper gym and assembly hall at Dandenong, and I set that up. But the head of the humanities, English, was seconded as a principal in another tech school. So I took over his teaching load, which was English. Yeah.
But you still hadn't.
I hadn't finished
your uni course.
No, I was still doing that.
So you just used your general sort of knowledge and wit.
That's right. Yeah, experience, age.
Age.
Yeah.
Did you think, this is actually quite good? Or
yes. I because I decided, but then see, his was a first class position, so I was actually teaching in the first class situation, and I taught it for 1 year. And he was given a job elsewhere as a principal, which left his vacancy. And I had to decide then, will I apply for his position at Dandenong, where I've been there for 12 years?
Yeah.
Or should I apply for somewhere else? And I thought, well, I know the kids, I know the staff, I know everything. I'll apply for the Dandenong position. So I did, and didn't get it. And the principal, who I knew pretty well by then, we inquired as to why I didn't get it, and he was told that because there were too many senior teachers, that's first-class teachers, in Dandenong already across the subjects, they didn't want to replace another one. So I got Oakley as the second choice, you see, so that's how I moved to Oakley.
Oakley Tech.
As a first class, I got the promotion there instead.
Yeah.
And here I was teaching English, head of department, with about 12 staff, having taught it for one year.
Amazing experience.
It was an amazing experience. But that's...
Bit of pressure?
Yes, of course. Looking after 12 experienced teachers. But that was good. It was a great school, and they had a lot of new facilities and so on, and a very pleasant principal, and I knew the vice principal. He'd been with me at Dandenong. So that was good. So I got by the first year, and of course the second year was 1972 when we went overseas.
Yes.
So I didn't take any classes the start of the year because we were going overseas, and came back, and soon after I got back, the principal died, young. So the vice principal had to take over his job.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, the next third position in his tech school is the senior master. So there's a principal, vice principal, and senior master. The senior master had been seconded into the education department and left a vacancy. So after a bit of a hassle, somebody else was actually appointed. The head of the maths was appointed senior master, acting senior master, but he took ill and went off. So, you know who became acting senior master?
Senior master.
Acting.
Only just a couple of years out of uni.
That's right. Oh, yeah. And then because the principal died and the vice principal had to move up in his position, the third place position, which is the senior master, had to become the vice principal.
Right.
Which was me again.
You kept stepping up into these roles.
That's right. And through a number of different
And you
factors.
weren't teaching any phys ed at this stage?
Oh, no, I'd finished with phys ed.
Moved on.
Long finished,
You
yeah.
didn't miss it?
No, not at that stage, no.
Had enough on your plate.
Oh, that's right. I had all these
the
acting
admin stuff
jobs. But after being the vice principal, I went in and I actually applied for the job officially, not just acting, and I got the job.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Mainly because they had changed the arrangements for appointments in the tech schools for principals previously, and then in that year for vice principals to a school-based selection committee. Instead of leaving it to the classifiers to just go down the list and say, well, that person's the most senior, they get the job. It was up to a committee of the school made up of teachers, in some cases students, members of the education department, someone from the regional office. They formed a committee who interviewed anybody who had applied for the job. And so they interviewed me that year for the vice principal job because I was already doing it anyway. So I was given the job. So I went into the principal and told him, and he said, oh, that's good because next year I'm going on a Churchill scholarship to England. I want you to take over as principal.
Acting principal. All these doors kept opening in front of you.
That's right.
You kept walking through them.
And all because I didn't get that job at Dandenong.
Yeah, actually turned out to be a good fit.
Oh,
all the opportunities at Oakley.
Oh, they were.
So you acted as principal?
I acted as senior master, I acted as vice principal, I acted as principal.
At Oakley?
At Oakley.
How long did you stay as acting principal at Oakley?
What was it? Oh, no, it was only about a 6 months scholarship that he had, I think.
Yeah. How did you find that? Stepping up
Well,
to the
it
role
was
of principal?
tricky because Oakley was the only school in the state that had a horticulture department, separate department altogether, training apprentices. And there were about 4 different areas of horticulture. There were parks and gardens. There was, forget what they are now, but nurseries. No, ones that looked after race courses and footy grounds and all the rest of it, and landscape garden. There were 4 divisions, and they were all apprentices.
Why did that make it tricky as the principal?
Because that was an apprenticeship school, the only one in the state. And they had a separate area down the other end of the school and everything else, and they had their own head.
Really?
It was like a different school, oh yes. And
but it all fell under your...
it was under my... Oh, that's right, as acting principal, oh yes.
Wow.
In fact, yeah, so that was interesting. So he came back, and then I went back to being vice principal, and then the next year got the job as principal of Aspendale.
So you applied for that?
Oh, yes, yeah, I was applied, but had to be interviewed, of course, by their committee.
Yeah.
And they obviously were happy with me, so
Wow.
they make a recommendation to the classifieds. I mean, if no one's got any objection, I suppose.
Yeah.
You
So Aspendale, and we're living at Glen Waverley by this stage.
Yes, that's the furthest they ever travelled.
So you drove, there's a fair drive down Springvale Road, all the
yeah,
way down to the
yeah,
beach, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
So probably half hour,
Oh, yeah, about a half hour.
more now with the traffic.
Um,
Be 45 minutes now with all the traffic.
well, except you could go on the East Link.
Would you go all that further? Anyway.
Yeah, that takes you into Frankston.
Yeah, Aspendale.
Well, no, I'd go on the Dandenong bypass, Frankston, what used to be the freeway, pardon me, from the industry road through to Frankston before East Link was built.
Yeah, Frankston Freeway.
Yeah, that one.
About halfway along there.
That's right. So you go off.
Get off and
Yeah.
So how long were you there, and what was that like as
I was
that
there.
your full-time principal role then?
That's right. Of a very big school which had gone co-ed that year. I had tried to get Oakley into co-ed because it was all boys' schools that I'd taught at. There were only a few girls' technical schools in Melbourne. And Aspinall had gone co-ed that year. See, I didn't go till halfway through the year because the position didn't become vacant until so on. And so there were already girls there when I went there, But the problem was, because it had always been a boys' school, there weren't the facilities for the girls. So there had to be portable toilets. There had to be 12 portable buildings because they had to have a cookery portable. They had to have a textiles, dressmaking portable, etc., etc. And the numbers were about 350, all told, boys and girls. And within 3 years, it was 950.
Whoa!
Partly I think because of the girls, because there was no other between Frankston and Sandringham. So any girls within that area
who were interested in that,
that didn't want to go to a high school, wanted to go to tech, they came to us.
Wow.
And
that's a huge growth.
It was enormous.
Doubled in size.
Trebled, yeah, virtually trebled. But in 1 year, I'd been there about 10 years, and one of the men who I knew at the regional office, who I got to know fairly well, what they did when I had been said before about all those different staff like the music and the psychom giants, the phys ed, and all the inspectors, they abolished them all, cut them out altogether. And all those who had been inspectors, the techs, the highs and the primaries, were sent to regional offices. They divided the education department up into regional offices, and there was one at Frankston. And they were virtually in charge of all the schools within that region. And ours was the southeast region, which I'd never been out of, at school, college, teaching, everything. I'd still within that region. And the boss of that particular region, Kevin.
Kevin Bolson.
That's right. Yes. And but there was a new one in charge when I went, or at least I heard about this position becoming vacant, and this one who'd come out to me tried to talk me into applying for it.
To going into the regional office, out of schools, into admin.
Yeah, which I did, and got the job. So I was down there for 1 year. And I was in charge then of all the tech schools within the region, a number of high schools, one of which was Pakenham, where Sandy had taught, and I knew him, and his wife was in Teachers College with me, so again, a small world. Anyway, I stayed the 1 year, and then they changed the region again and split up the regional office into several different regions. Every new parliament, every new government comes in, makes changes.
Yeah, shuffles around, yeah. So what did you do?
So I went back to school. But that was, as the principal, back to my, because it was still my school.
It was a temporary
I was only that's right, yeah.
You hadn't lost your job.
Oh, no. I went back to it eventually, because that's when I was very sick. So I was away the whole term.
What were you sick with?
Pulmonary embolism.
Lung.
Clot in the lung, that's right. Anyway, after a time I went back to school, but I decided that I would retire the following year at 55. But when I went into the superannuation board, they told me about another scheme that was going, that if I resigned before I was 55, there were certain benefits. Like I would get back all the super that I'd paid with interest and other benefits. And so I decided, yes, I'd take it. So I went up to the education department and I said, how do I resign? I never considered resigning. And the chap said, oh, well, go up and ask for staffing. So we went up there and the chap said, well, as long as I've got it in writing that you're resigning, that's okay. So I said, can you give me a pen and a piece of paper? So he gave me a piece of foolscap and a pen. I wrote out, as from such and such a date, I hereby resign. Boom. That was it. That was on a Friday. I went back to school on the Monday and said, I'm leaving today.
See you later.
That's it. See you later. That's right. That was it.
They give you a send-off?
Later. They had later because I'd gone by then.
Yeah.
So that was interesting.
So did you decide to fully retire, or did you find a bit
No,
more work?
I
'Cause you were
thought-
only 55.
I actually retired the week before I turned 55.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I'll do something else. It's too early to
Stop
do
altogether.
nothing. So
Yeah.
I'll perhaps cut lawns or something like that. And then one of the staff at Aspendale said, my father's doing a job and he's finishing. So there will be a position there. And where was it at? South Melbourne Presbyterian Church, where I'd grown up.
Doing what?
It was a very involved job. Anyway, I went down to see them and went with this other fellow, and we talked with the administrators there, and it turned out that they'd already got a maintenance fellow in, and so the job was only for 1 day a week. So I said, oh, well, that's okay, I'll take it, because I liked the area. So I used to go down to South Melbourne, drive their van that they had, a big van, drive it without a special licence, and I'd go into the city and collect boxes of things, of second-hand stuff that had been sent to the church from all over the country, all different churches and so on.
Donations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd take it back to the church, and there were ladies working there, and they'd sort through the stuff. And if it was any good, they'd put it aside. If it was no good, they'd throw it in the rubbish into a special heap. So then when they'd finished that, I'd hop in the van again and drive down to Albert Park to what they called a goodwill shop. Not opportunity shop, a goodwill shop. And I'd hand over the good stuff to them. And the lady in charge of that one was previously my Sunday school teacher.
You were just never to get out of the south there before.
Anyway, I'd feed that off, and there was another one down in Middle Park. I'd go down there as well and deliver some there. And then after, if there was the rubbish, I'd go down to a special place in Port Melbourne, like a rubbish tip place, and I'd tip all the rubbish into that, and then drive back. And then in the afternoon, I'd drive the bus around and collect a group of old ladies, and from Albert Park, and in fact St Vincent Place on the opposite corner to where we lived, and take them down to Port Melbourne Church. By the time it was called South Melbourne Port Mission, it wasn't South Presbyterian Church anymore, and I'd take them down to the meeting that they had down there, like afternoon tea and social thing, and then drive around and then go back and get them and take them home again. And that was the day, finished. I'd go home. So I only did that for, I don't know, probably a month or two, a couple of months. And then I was out one night with Norm Allen and some others, Rob Gallagher, and he was telling me about the job that he was doing down at the TAC, and that there was a position coming up there because one of the fellows was very unwell. And would I be interested? So I talked to him about it and decided, yes, I'd be interested in that.
Doing what?
Gardening, virtually. It was called a horticultural assistant because it was more than just gardening. The 12 acres property we maintained, but we also had
rehab centre.
At the rehab centre.
TAC rehab centre.
It was then.
Car accidents.
Yes.
Mostly any road accidents, yes. They'd been hit on bikes or pedestrians even.
We're doing rehab.
Yeah, it was called the TAC Rehab Centre.
Yeah.
And as I say, it was called a horticultural assistant because apart from looking after the area, we had a huge vegetable area. We had glass houses and igloos. And when some of the patients who were inpatients living in were getting a lot better, they would send them down to our area for work to do. So they would do gardening work. And
So it was part of their rehab in a way.
that's right, yes, get them moving. And also some with only one arm or in wheelchairs. Sometimes we went around to their place and had special raised beds built and so on for
Garden
them.
beds.
Yeah.
Yep.
So all that was part, and we worked as a team with the doctors, the physios, and everything else.
Yep.
And that was the instruction part of it. So the rest of the time we maintained the gardens as well.
And what did you enjoy about that?
Outside work, which I always love as a phys ed. The fact that I had studied anatomy and physiology at the university, everything suited me. Close to home, uniforms supplied. Yeah, it was just great. As I said before, I used to play tennis at lunchtimes with people I knew and so on.
And how long did you end up staying there?
Well, I only wanted some part-time work, but this was full-time. So I said, well, I'll take it, but I'll only stay for a short time. 5 years later, full-time, I decided I'd perhaps go on to part-time. So I went to the boss, who I used to play golf with as well, and said, I think I only want to work 2 days next year. All right, well, what days would you like? So I chose my days and went on to part-time for another 2 years. And then we decided to go to Africa for a holiday, so I stopped work. And that's that. So that's what I finished.
Amazing.
So it's an interesting...
And that was the last full-time work that you did.
Was
lots of other bits and pieces with, as volunteer, of course.
Oh, well...
driving people around for church.
Oh, yes, and as a instructor with Legacy Boys Class.
Oh, that was years before.
That was years and years before, but I started the one... When people finished the course at the phys ed, the boss or second in charge of the phys ed staff used to second people and get them interested in taking boys' classes because he was in charge of it.
Like gymnastics, was it?
Yes,
So boys'
gym. Mainly gym, yeah. But a range of ages for them.
Yeah.
And I started the Oakley one, and it was an interesting one because I taught them to play basketball, and then years later we entered a team, the Oakley Legacy Boys, as a team in the Dandenong comp, of which I was also president. And we actually won the competition. It was only C grade, but these were kids that I had taught to play at Legacy. When they wanted to start a Dandenong one, we moved the Oakley one up, so it was a combined Oakley-Dandenong one. Yeah. And I did that for years and years. Every Friday night.
Who are these boys who would go to a legacy club? Why are they there?
Because their father had either been killed at the war or injured at the war.
So that's what legacy is, looking after.
Legacy looked after the family. And the family of. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, and
it's a good thing to do.
Oh, it was great. So I enjoyed that. They were a good lot of kids. I got to know some of them very well. But the busiest night I did other jobs like pre-Christmas mail sorting at the post offices.
Like just for a bit of extra cash?
Yeah, so that we could go on holiday because we didn't have any money. Teachers' salaries were very low at that stage. And by that stage we had you two kids. So I worked Friday nights at Legacy and...
at the post office?
At the post office, no, well, I worked at Legacy all a year, but the post office job was just for 3 weeks before Christmas. I did it in town first at Spencer Street for a couple of years.
Just sorting, not delivering?
No, just sorting. The business in town was a bit of a worry. That was when I was still living in Albert Park, because they had a machine, conveyor belt, zipping along.
With letters or parcels?
Letters. And you'd get a bunch of letters, and you'd have to put them into the right postcode.
What do you mean put them into, like into a box?
Drop in the slot where... Right there. The conveyor belts are about 6 conveyor belts
shooting
in front, and going flat out, and you drop them in and hope you went into the right one. And they ended up at the end into a bag, you see. Now all the Dandenong ones would go up to Dandenong.
Sorting centre. And
they'd be sorted out again. And that's what I did in later years when we lived in Springvale and Glen Waverley, that I did each year for quite a while. And that was from 10 o'clock at night till 5 o'clock the next morning. You sorted them all that night.
On top of teaching during the day? No.
And another thing I did was taught swimming at the Dandenong Baths. It was a paid thing. I had private students. So the worst time I had was one night on a Friday. I had to go down to the pool after I'd been working all day.
As a physio teacher?
Yep. Go down to the pool because I had some students. I'd go from there to the legacy class, take the class, and then go to the post office and sort letters all right. So I had 4 jobs that day.
Oh,
yeah, I survived.
You must have been so tired.
Well, you get used to these sort of things. I didn't go to sleep much at post office. It was awful standing up sometimes. You'd get a bit groggy and almost fall, but that's all right. That's good.
You don't want that job back?
I don't want any of those jobs back, thank you. No. So there you go. That's what I did for work.